Production methods. There are several different ways we can produce this content. First of all, we can do deep or narrow. So if we wanted to go deep, we could just do a simple 1-1-1 approach. One problem, one solution, one sitting, just like we would do for our own products, only apply them to other people's expertise. Or we could take a 1-1-1 approach for several different problems and break it out over multiple modules. And again, one expert could solve 3 or 4 problems and have 3 to 4 modules. Or you could have 3 to 4 experts solve each one of those 3 to 4 problems that are related to each other. And that brings up the second point here, one or many. Do you want a single expert or a combination of many experts? By the way, you can be one of those experts yourself. So it's a good way to share the stage, so to speak, with people that are in another level than you. But hey, you're now on their level. Why? Because you're right alongside them as a peer in a product. Single or multimedia, video, PDF, audio, or a combination of all of the above. Typically, when you're starting out, keep it super duper simple, make some money, and then you can go back and improve upon it with version 2 or with a different product in the future. Lastly, the consideration here is conventional or experimental. When in doubt, follow the formula. But there might be cases where you want to spice things up and do something unique and different to potentially grab and capture more imagination. Of course, with that, there is a risk that you run by coloring outside the lines. So it's a consideration. So let's break down some of these even more specifically. If we go deep and narrow, deep could look like this. How to use green smoothie cleanses to increase your body's metabolism within 5 days. This is one problem. We could provide one solution, specifically knocking it out really in one sitting with the interview of the expert. And then we could go and fine tune it and, of course, create the outline for it ahead of time. If we want to take a more narrow approach, here's one. 7 simple ways to stimulate your metabolism so you can eat the same calories and lose more weight. That's a good hook, by the way. And so we, in this particular case, could interview 7 different experts, each with their own aspect, and focus on metabolism. And then when we're done, we now have a product that we can sell. Here's another example of deep. This is actually the product that Kieran commissioned from me to create by interviewing me and taking the resultant thing of the interview and selling that, which was, I believe, a consultation that he paid for. He then took it, the interview, and then sold it. This was all the way back in February of 2011, but of course it can still work even today. Underground Jason Fladlin training for pennies. Now, I don't know if I'm a star even now, much less back then, but that's kind of the hook there. And really the major hook is for pennies. And it goes like this. There's, first of all, a quote. I'm so impressed, really do marketers show this kind of stuff for if they do, you have to pay big bucks for it. So there's a testimonial from somebody who's endorsing and promoting this product as affiliate. And then the copy goes like this. Recently, Jason Fladlin did a private webinar with Kieran. So Kieran McDonough, right? That covered in detail a rarely discussed topic that all IMers need to know. And since Jason is in the top 1% of marketers earning 6 figures per month, you can bet he knows exactly what he is talking about. This training is good for those at every level, from newbie to expert, which is not an easy feat to pull off in a single product. But Jason does it flawlessly, which becomes very clear as you see the reviews. So blah, 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 yada, yada, yada. Go over there and buy it. And I basically talked about what to do once you get an email list. And so Kieran pays me my consulting fee, which at the time I think was $500 an hour, maybe $250 an hour. I can't remember what. It's I don't have one anymore because I don't do these anymore. But back then I could do them. I was already making over $1 million a year, even way back then. And so he interviews me and he records it, and then he says, he gets asked for permission ahead of time. He says, would it be okay if I do this? I said, sure. You know why I said sure? Because he's then going off on his own, working deals, getting people to promote it, getting exposure, and now there's thousands upon thousands upon thousands of people who I might not otherwise reach, who I now get reach from. I got paid some money up front. He got paid money up front. He's a good customer of mine. You can see why I'd be very open to something like that. So who are you a good customer of that you can also impress upon to actually go out there and get exposure for that person, therefore not wasting their time and actually benefiting them directly? And here's the other question. Who can you just flat out pay and get the permission to take the recording of that and use it for marketing purposes? So that way, even if you don't get exposure, it's still worth their time. Here's a narrow approach. So this is a book, The Human Side of Dyslexia, 142 interviews with real people telling real stories. And by the way, let's read the other one. An inside look at dyslexia, the challenges, emotional rewards from childhood through the college experience. I don't know if 142 is a benefit at this point or its own kind of problem. But by interviewing quote-unquote real people with real stories, that's very powerful. So these are people who've experienced it and can share insight from their own unique experience, and somebody facilitated, found these individuals, and then documented them. I would very much recommend solution-focused documentation, but taking real-world people, many of which who have experience, and just having them share their experience. There are so many markets where just the sharing of experience can help solve problems. And now that you know how to focus and find problems and consider how to solve them, we can now leverage people with knowledge to be that solution. So this is a narrow example. One versus many. So it can be a single expert who is extremely knowledgeable on a specific topic yet hasn't or doesn't want to monetize it. Or it could be many, several experts that can be step-by-steps or criteria in your solution. So if I was selling a technique on how to write sales letters, I could have one expert talk about how to write headlines. I could have one expert talk about how to write bullet points. I could have another expert talk about dealing with the price objection, and so on and so forth. And then I could logically, my work is not only interviewing them, but creating the step-by-step process or the criteria. These X number of things you need to consider to be successful with writing sales copy, and interview an expert on each topic. So here's an example of one expert that they did over a series. So that's kind of the hook. An expat fever series book, interview with an expat. This is an expat in a specific location. So one expert per location in a series. It's a very clever use of hook. And we'll talk about hooks more later on. And then here's an example with many experts. Families of two, interviews with happily married couples without children by choice. This is a very narrow focused, I might add. We're narrowly focused on a segment and kind of going deep on it too, in a sense. Interviews with happily married couples without children by choice. Now, again, this isn't exactly a solution-minded type of product. This is more of a identification type of product to make people feel comfortable in their own skin with their decisions. But again, what could we do? Could we find people who have solutions that are very narrowly focused, such as married couple with children, without children by choice, who have found happiness? Happiness without children. That could be a potential hook. I don't know. I don't know if that's a solution or not, but you can see here where we can have many different experts share their insights and experiences. Single versus multi. So single is usually for smaller price points or where speed is the primary factor. So usually I will go with a single expert when I just want to get the product out there and when I just want to make some quick money very efficiently and keep things really simple. Multi experts is... single expert, and this is true for single experts, by the way, but single specific media, where I just say video or audio and I'm done. Multi is where I want to win the favor of the contributor and or hit a higher income goal. So if I want to really wow or impress the person that I'm leveraging their knowledge of, I don't want to just knock it out in its primary format. I want to add all the extra little bells and whistles to make them say, dang, this guy's a pro, and be more excited to continue to work with me on other projects in the future. So that's an example of a multimedia consideration as opposed to a single, because you can take one product and then leverage it several different ways. Lastly, conventional versus experimental. Conventional is just the content and the theme. That's the major factor of contribution. So you're going to use the formula, purpose, why, what, how, and then the theme is just whatever that hook is, that one problem, one solution, one format, or one sitting hook. Or experimental. Is there anything you can do different than normal to electrify both the contributor or the contributors of knowledge as well as the customers that you will reach? It's riskier when you color outside the lines, but hey, sometimes it might be worth a shot. And if you can justify it, have fun. Try a little different thing. Don't get radically, crazily different and reinvent the wheel here, but it's okay to try one thing here, one thing there, a theme that's maybe a little out there, or a problem that maybe isn't directly an obvious problem and you're not exactly sure that customers are excited for, but heck, it's worth a shot because sometimes that's where the biggest breakthroughs come. And if you want to get experimental, I got a little 3 tips for you, basically. The first area you can get experimental on is theme. So the Superhero Summit is an experimental concept that Marisa worked, where she took each person and made them a superhero. Now, when you get experimental, you do complicate things. So there's more challenge there. And I don't want to start exactly, I wouldn't recommend you start there, but it is something you can do down the line. Contrarians, by the way, where you take the rebels or the people that buck the conventional wisdom accepted within that audience. See, this is called a contrarian theory. In any culture or in any marketplace, there are typically 90% of people who will accept the general logic and the general concepts of that market. But on every marketplace, there's 10%, give or take, who absolutely don't accept it simply because everybody else accepts it. The counterculture, right? There's the culture and then there's the counterculture. That 10% can sometimes be the most lucrative, most powerful segment that you can reach. So intentionally cutting out 90% of the audience and going after the rebels or the contrarians or the people that don't like conventional wisdom. I mean, that's what alternative medicine is, by the way. And so internet marketing is all contrarians who have bucked the system of the normal way of trying to make money. So can you go contrarians within a specific market to buck the system that 9 out of 10 people accept so that 1 out of 10 it sings to them and gets them very excited? Or getting very specific into demographics. So not just men or women, but maybe a specific type of woman or a specific type of men within the niche. And then you can even get more specific on the niche itself. Forbidden, the lost manuscript, the hidden blah, 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 right? The little discussed aspect, maybe because people are scared to discuss it. The had to force it out of them, that kind of stuff. If that's true and legit, and you could create situations where that occurs, that can be powerful. It is experimental, though. And series. So the most popular one is the Chicken Soup for the Soul. You can simply go Volume 1, Volume 2, Volume 3. Conversations with ... Conversations with Millionaires was a very popular theme many years ago. So by theming it out over a series as well, that implies that there's more value to it because most things aren't done in a serial format. But it's experimental. It's outside of the normal. So when you're starting, just focus on 111, find that one expert, create the outline for them to make that one solution, suss it out of them, and then go to work on the hook and some of the other elements we're going to discuss later in this module to get out there with the deal that you make with them and make some money.